failure to adjust. And at the very end of the book, Ted Alden talks about America needing a second chance. What do you mean by that, Ted?
What I mean is that we basically kind of blew it in the first era of global economic competition that the U.S. really entered into. My book traces 40-plus years of growing U.S. integration in the global economy and the competitive challenges that it posed. And I argue that we just left too many Americans out of the equation. A lot of U.S. companies did very well. A lot of Americans did very well. Trade was good in a lot of ways for the U.S. and the world, but we just let too many people not prosper under that system, and we've got to find a new way going forward.
Ted, we talked to Barry Eichengreen of Berkeley yesterday. He does not suggest we will see a Plaza Accord dollar or a Rubin dollar of 2000, 2002, but nevertheless, we've got dollar strength. From your prism of international relations, is that Mr. Trump's biggest headache? Is it truly Trump strong dollar?
I think it's going to be a problem for him because his goal is to boost manufacturing job creation in the United States. These are industries that compete globally, and a strong dollar is a headwind for them. And a lot of the other things he's talking about doing in terms of infrastructure, tax cuts, are likely to drive the dollar up further. So I think it is his biggest problem. It could be a real anchor on his ability to move forward with his economic program.
All right, Ted, when you go back to your failure to adjust how Americans got left behind in the global economy, how do you suggest to fix it? It's, I guess, a European fabric to say, well, it's income inequality. You redistribute, you create growth, you create wealth, and then you redistribute it. This is not the way that your president is going about it.
No, I mean, there are elements in the Trump program that I like. I think infrastructure is a key part of this. I think it's going to create a lot of jobs. I think it'll improve the competitiveness of the economy. I think manufacturing is important. I think corporate tax reform, attracting more manufacturing investment matters a lot. What I worry about is the items that will help working people. So he's not talking at all about job retraining. We know we've got a big skills shortage problem. The health care reform that the Republicans are talking about could leave a lot of people worse off than they are currently. So I hear some good things on the corporate competitiveness side. I worry about the people working in this country and whether they're also going to get a leg up.
But, Ted, do you not need to have a more skilled workforce? If you go back to manufacturing, plain and simple, to what America, I guess, did 50, 60 years ago, then you're almost competing with China directly, and it makes no sense as the global economy moves. You have emerging economies, and the developed economies need to focus more on innovation and quality jobs.
Yeah, I agree. And if you look at the manufacturing jobs that are being created today, they are information intensive. They're robotic operations. They require computer design skills. It's a different set of skills that manufacturing workers need. But they need some help in gaining those. I mean, the United States spends less money on these kind of retraining programs than basically any other country in the OECD. So if there's not some assistance for the workforce, the skill shortage is going to remain, which is a big problem from the company end, and people aren't going to have the talents that they need to fill these jobs.
Ted Alden, a blast from the past. I haven't asked this question in over a decade. I'm going to ask it to you right now. Are we heading towards twin deficit hysteria again? Are we heading towards a Trump administration where we see a deterioration in the fiscal budget deficit and a deterioration in the trade deficit?
I think that is entirely possible, and really you're going back to the Reagan years, the last time we had that twin deficit problem. But there are a lot of echoes of Reagan in the Trump administration's approach, very much, going after foreign countries where we don't like their trading practice. Reagan was rather aggressive on that front. Tax cuts, fiscal stimulus, all of which is going to drive the dollar up, which will increase the trade deficit. So, yeah, I think that is actually a legitimate concern.
I know you're an expert on Australia. I know you're an expert on the bad hombres down in Mexico. Ted Alden, help us here. What do we need from Secretary Tillerson?
I think we need a little bit of steadiness. I mean, the reality is we have a president who learned his negotiating style in the New York real estate business, and obviously he knows that business a lot better than I do. But when it comes to diplomacy, you need a different set of skills. I think he learned something in his call with President Peña Nieto of Mexico, which is you can't just back foreign leaders to the wall. They've got their own domestic constituencies to answer for, and you've got to give them a face-saving way out. With Australia, you know, he seems determined to walk away from the deal we made with Australia on refugees. That's going to cause political turmoil in Australia. You just can't do that kind of thing to your friends. You've got to give their leaders a face-saving way to move forward.
Right, but Ted, going back to your point that, you know, Reagan was putting on some similar policies when asking, I guess, you know, countries for better deals, but we have much better framework now than we did when Reagan was in charge. Does it mean that our infrastructures, you know, the G20, the G7, when they talk about currency manipulation, should be completely ignored?
Well, we have a better framework, but it remains to be seen if the Trump administration is going to follow it. I mean, the thing that Reagan had going for him is the United States could threaten to close its market unless Japan was mostly the target, did various things to boost imports from the United States. Under the rules we have now, the WTO, the NAFTA in North America, you're not supposed to operate in these unilateral ways. If you're upset about the trading practices of your partners, you're supposed to use these formal dispute settlement systems. But Trump and a number of his advisors have made it clear they're not entirely comfortable with being constrained by those rules. So it remains to be seen how that's going to play out in terms of this administration adhering to all the rules that the United States has committed itself to in the trade world.
What would it take for the world economies outside of the U.S. to actually come together? I don't know if it's squaring against some of the policies of America or against protectionism, but is there any reality in the possibility of a kind of Plaza Accord without the U.S.?
I don't see a Plaza Accord as such. The currency concern, I mean, and to be honest, the currencies are fluctuating very dramatically right now, so I don't actually think we're in a Plaza Accord type of situation. On the trade front, what I worry about is that the rest of the world is going to organize around the United States. The Trump administration's decision to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I think, was a big own goal. The TPP was potentially a lot of leverage against China in terms of shaping the next generation of trade rules. With the United States gone, and Trump determined, it seems, to push Australia into the Chinese camp, I think you're going to see a lot of these countries organizing around China instead. That's not going to be a good thing for U.S. economic interests.
Ted, one final question. You studied at Berkeley under one of the giants of trade theory and game theory, Vinod Agarwal. What do you do with the game theory that they're acclaimed for at Berkeley? What will be the responses to what we're observing from Mr. Trump?
Yeah, shout out to Professor Agarwal, by the way. I saw him a couple of months ago. It was great to catch up with him. Well, game theory tells you that the best outcomes are ones in which both sides can win. That if you play games in which they're win-lose, then the outcomes are usually not ideal ones. And trade historically has not been a zero-sum game. It's been a win-win kind of game. Obviously, some countries gain a bit more, others maybe a little less. But the whole idea of trade is to find outcomes that create mutual benefits. I think, unfortunately, President Trump doesn't really understand that. He sees negotiating entirely in an I win, you lose framework. And I hope that his thinking will evolve to realize that's not the way it works in trade and economics.
Ted,
and you have to have a broader framework.
Thank you so much. Ted Alden, Counsel for Foreign Relations. I can't say enough. Is this to give you clarity about what we're going through in Washington?